Aric Almirola announced that he will not return to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024, and Austin lets it slip that Sheldon Creed will be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, while tensions slip between Sheldon Creed, Austin Hill, and Richard Childress Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We'll go ahead and start talking about Moose Fraternity. As it was announced on Friday morning that Moose Fraternity has signed a sponsor extension with Trackhouse Racing through 2025, and they're going to sponsor Ross Chastain for 4 races each in 2024 and 2025. Moose Fraternity, I believe, has been a sponsor of Ross Chastain since around 2019 or 2020 when he drove for Chip Ganassi Racing, and they joined up with Ross Chastain when he went over to Trackhouse Racing starting in 2022. Moose Fraternity has been loyal. Of course, they were the big sponsor part of the Hail Melon, which is the 1-year anniversary of the Hail Melon. Really cool to see that they will be continuing working with Trackhouse Racing, which most of Ross Chastain's sponsors for 2024 and 2025 have pretty much been set. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chevrolet. As Bob Poggers put out a tweet yesterday saying that Chevrolet has clinched the Cup Manufacturers title, meaning that for all 3 series, that being the Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series championships, all 3 of them have been won by Chevrolet for the Manufacturers title. Huge congratulations to Chevrolet. Chevy has dominated all 3 series this year in 2023, so it doesn't surprise or shock me they've been able to get it done. Nonetheless, massive, huge congratulations to them on getting that accomplished. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Walmart. Now, it was reported, I believe, by Jeff Gluck and even Bob Poggers as well, that after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, NASCAR had to go to Walmart in Eden, North Carolina to buy Tide to clean up the racetrack. And apparently before the race even happened like 3 or 4 hours ago, or happened, I should say, they were still trying to clean up the racetrack from all the oil and debris that gone down first. I believe it came from Sam Mayer and Jeffrey Earnhardt from the first big red tap around 10 laps to go. And then I think a lot of drivers, including Austin and Cole Custer, laid down a ton of oil. And there was also a ton of oil laid down from the previous strike that took place between Jeffrey Earnhardt and Sam Mayer when those cars were completely destroyed and they ran around the racetrack. There was a lot of chaos that ended up taking place. Nonetheless, glad to see that NASCAR got the track cleaned up before the Cup Series race happened, but it's crazy they went to Eden, North Carolina to get the track cleaned up because it was crazy how much oil was on the racetrack and how long. They had like a 30-minute red flag after that happened, which is absolutely wild and absolutely crazy. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Xfinity Series 500. Yesterday's NASCAR Cup Series race, according to reports, it officially sold out. Many races so far in the 2023 NASCAR Cup season have sold out this year. Gateway had a near sellout. You have Pocono had a sell in the infield grandstands. Michigan sold out. The Daytona 500 sold out. And it's really cool to see that people are showing up to the racetrack. And it's just really awesome to see. I think there's been like 12 or 13 sellouts this year in 2023. So obviously there's been issues with the ratings and all that kind of stuff. But it's been really fun and awesome and cool to see all these races sell out in 2023. And I hope next year in 2024, every single NASCAR Cup Series race and many other series races can sell out next year in 2024. Nonetheless, really awesome stuff and glad to see that all these races are starting to sell out. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sean Hingorani. As it was announced on Friday that Sean Hingorani will drive the 75 for Henderson Motorsports this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. What's really interesting about this is Henderson Motorsports, I believe, will be running a Chevy this weekend because I believe Kyle Busch Motorsports is helping Sean Hingorani out. Sean Hingorani has been part of the Toyota camp for the last few years and has been driving for Venturing Motorsports, and I believe also, I think, drove for Tricon in his debut as well. I really am not the biggest fan of Sean Hingorani. I know he's won quite a few races in the ARCA West Series, but one of my issues with Sean Hingorani is he's extremely aggressive and way over his head out on the racetrack. And that's something that he is going to have to clean up once he gets in these series because people are not going to put up with it. A lot of people have been frustrated, including his own co-owner at the time in ARCA West and ARCA Series. Basically, some stuff to happen in Mid-Ohio. I think that that's one thing that needs to be talked about. Like I said, is Sean Hingorani. I don't know how he's going to do this weekend, but Sean Hingorani has been involved in a lot of incidents and a lot of controversies, and he's got a lot to clean up as a race car driver. Hopefully, he's not over his head and doesn't cause a lot of controversy this weekend at Phoenix Raceway and doesn't affect the outcome of the championship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Mexico City Grand Prix. While the NASCAR Cup Series race was taking place yesterday, you also had the Mexico City Grand Prix. And once again, not a surprise or a shock, Max Verstappen was able to pick up his 16th victory of 2023, breaking his own record of having the most wins in a season in Formula One history. There was a little bit of controversy at the start of the race when Charles Leclerc and Sergio Perez got into each other. To me, that was on Sergio. Unfortunately, came down the racetrack and got into Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc really had nowhere to go, unfortunately. I know that a lot of the fans from Mexico who support Sergio, so they were, of course, booing Charles. But in my opinion, that was on Charles Leclerc. That was on Sergio Perez coming down the racetrack. There was a big wreck for Kevin Magnussen as well that ended up taking place. But other than that, not a ton of stuff happened in the event. It was just a dominant day for Max Verstappen. Once again, 51st career victory. I would not be surprised or shocked if Max Verstappen wins another 3 or 4 races for the end of the year. And I think Max Verstappen will end up having like a 20-win season this year, which is going to be a record for Formula One. There's a great chance of possibility as well that Max Verstappen will continue to break records and continue doing great things in Formula One. Huge congratulations to him on winning the Mexico City Grand Prix, a massive and incredible accomplishment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about short track racing. Now, we just had yesterday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Martinsville Speedway. Before the race had happened, I noticed during the race, due to basically the warm weather conditions, and also there was a lot of rubber going down on the racetrack. And I think a big thing with the track is that with Martinsville, you need to have a lot of rubber buildup to create multiple different lines of racing. And a lot of drivers agreed that the racing yesterday or the racing before, they thought they were really optimistic about, including Dale Jr. Now, Denny Hamlin, of course, said that we need to add more horsepower to these cars, which I 100% agree. But I think the tire fall, because there actually was tire fall throughout the run yesterday, and the rubber being laid down, I think it actually produced a pretty solid race yesterday. In my opinion, one of the best short track races we've seen with the next-gen car. And also, I think a really fun and intriguing race as well. And the best race I've seen at Martinsville as well since the next-gen car started. We saw a lot of great racing. We saw the great battles between Ryan Blaney and Denny Hamlin for the race lead. And you saw a lot of passing being able to happen. You could bump and run somebody. It was hard still. These next-gen cars are really tough. But you could bump and run somebody, you could spin somebody out, and you could not do that in previous races. There's still work that needs to be done with this next-gen car on the short tracks, but I believe the NASCAR has finally found a solution. I think the tire, for the first time, and Goodyear did finally, for the first time, actually brought a tire that makes a lot of sense. Again, there's still stuff that needs to be done with the short track package 100%, but I think NASCAR finally found a step in the right direction. That was the best Martinsville race I have seen in a few years. That was fun. That was exciting. It was almost better than the Xfinity Series race on Saturday, though I think the Xfinity race was still better. I think NASCAR is finally starting to find something for the next-gen car on the short tracks, and it gives me confidence for short track racing going forward, and I think we finally found some hope for short track racing. Nonetheless, really awesome and great stuff, and I thought that was an exciting and really fun race, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson, of course, we already know this past week, had purchased the All-Star Circuit of Champions from Jimmy Johnson with his brother-in-law, Brad Sweet. And Kyle Larson kind of talked about that purchase of the All-Star Circuit of Champions. Obviously, Kyle Larson owns the High Limit Racing Series with his brother-in-law, Brad Sweet, and they, like I said, had purchased the High Limit Racing Series. This is really, really big for dirt racing as a whole because one of the biggest goals of the High Limits Racing Series is to try to get more purses and more money for the series and trying to create higher purses as well. He's been a big advocate about that really since about the last couple of years, and they see huge purse money coming into play. We don't know what the driver lineup is going to be. It's probably going to be a combination of the All-Star Circuit of Champions and also the High Limit Racing Series. And there's probably going to be some tracks from the All-Star Circuit of Champions as well going in. Now, Kyle Larson says he's not fully involved in the operations. He says that he's got people that are working in that series that are trying to help out quite a bit. Nonetheless, though, I think it's really exciting to see the future of dirt racing as a whole, and it's really cool to see that they have done this. It's been rumored for the last few months. Obviously, Tony Stewart really likes Kyle Larson a lot, so this doesn't surprise or shock me, and shock a lot of people in size that this ended up happening. And I think for the first time in a very, very long time, especially for the dirt racing, we have dirt competition. I think it's going to make the World of Outlaws try to make themselves look a lot better, though I think the World of Outlaws is doing a great job. And I think it's going to make high limit racing good. Competition is always a great thing. You see the best product out there. I think it's really exciting stuff that Kyle Larson has purchased the All-Star Circuit of Champions. I think it's really huge for that and awesome and really cool stuff. And I think the future of dirt racing is becoming a lot more promising, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fontana. As Alan Bailey put out a tweet, I believe it was on Friday evening, showing that track demolition for Fontana has officially begun. We all know at this point that Fontana is expected to become a short track, but will it end up becoming a short track? That's been a big question. We don't have any sort of timetable currently at the moment on when this track is going to be officially done and when we'll be coming back. Now, if the short track does come into play, as some people think it could come into play, I think the earliest we could see the short track come out is maybe sometime in 2026 or 2027 at the earliest. If they're able to get the short track down and they continue to improve the short track package as well, I would not be surprised or shocked if Fontana does in fact end up hosting the season finale. I think Fontana, it's a shame that there's not going to be a 2-mile track, though, because in my opinion, Auto Club produced a fantastic race the last 2 times. I think the next-gen car extremely excelled here at this track, and I think we saw a rejuvenation of this track over the course of the last few years. But with how much the land was, I think it was like $500 million for the land, it didn't surprise anybody or shock anybody that this was going down. So it's not a surprise that they're tearing the track down, unfortunately. It's disappointing, though, because in my honest opinion, Fontana would have produced amazing and great racing still with the next-gen car. But like I said, the short track package itself is definitely showing some major improvement and signs and hope toward the future. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see Fontana. We'll see if it comes to short track. I'm really worried about the future of Fontana. I'm not sure if they're even going to have the short track at this point, but we'll see if they do, in fact, bring this short track out and they're able to get the short track package fixed and ready to go. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Toni Breidinger. Now, Motorsport put out a tweet in regards to 5 of the most influential female drivers. You had Toni Breidinger, you had, I think, Bianca Busmeni, who's working, I think, with that female series, if you F1 Academy, and she'll be development driver for McLaren. There's also, I think, Lindsey Brewer part of that as well, and a couple other drivers, including Natalie Decker, part of that. A little surprised that Hailie Deegan was not part of that, considering I think Hailie Deegan, despite the fact she hasn't had a great year in the truck series, I think she's had more influence for females in motorsports than some of those people on that list. That being said, Toni Breidinger actually quote tweeted that from Motorsport, and she says that she has locked down her 2024 plans. Now, what is going on with Toni Breidinger? What could be happening? Well, I think there's 2 things that could be happening. Number 1, she could be returning to ARCA in 2024 with Venturini Motorsports. She ran a lot of races with Venturini Motorsports in 2023, and I have to say that Toni Breidinger has improved on the racetrack. She's not competing for wins at this point, but we saw some pretty big improvement from Toni Breidinger in the 2023 season. She got a few top 5s as well, and she's getting closer and closer to winning. So I can see her staying in ARCA once again in 2024. But another big possibility is that she could be going to the Truck Series in 2024 with Tricon Garage. If I'm not mistaken, the 1 truck is still available for 2024. You've got Dean Thompson returning the 5 truck. You've got Corey Heim returning the 11. And the Gray Brothers are expected to retain their respective rides for 2024, meaning there's only going to be 1 truck that is available. Another possibility is that there could be a split where she could run a lot of ARCA races and also run quite a few truck races in 2024. Obviously, Jesse Love's going to Rich Schultz Racing next year in 2024, so we're not going to see him move over there. So I think Toni Breidinger has a really good chance of possibly moving up to the Truck Series on a full-time basis. Will that happen? I'm not entirely sure at this point. Nonetheless, we'll see what happens with Toni Breidinger's future, but I think there's a good chance that we'll see her full-time in the Truck Series and maybe go into a different series next year. But Toni Breidinger has locked her plans down for 2024. I hope she can continue improving because I think she has shown major signs of improvement over the last year or two. Nonetheless, wishing her the best luck, and we'll see what she ends up doing for 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Ratcliffe. As Jason Ratcliffe confirmed, speaking, I believe, to Claire B. Lang on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, that he will be retiring at the end of 2023 and will not continue crew chiefing in 2024. Jason Ratcliffe has been one of the best crew chiefs we have seen in the last 25 years, especially in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He won the championship with Kyle Busch as a crew chief in 2009 and has been a crew chief in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with the 19 team, and has also been a crew chief of that All-Star 18 car, and has worked with a lot of great talents and a lot of great drivers, and even worked with Matt Kenseth for a few years in the NASCAR Cup Series. And we saw what he could do in Matt Kenseth those few years. I think it was his crew chief for 2013 when he went on to win 8 races. And I think he's won like 50 races as a crew chief in the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well. Like I said, I think he's probably the greatest crew chief we've seen in NASCAR Xfinity Series history. And I wish Jason Ratcliffe the best of luck. Now, he's not going to be out of the sport completely. He might take like a higher up role basically in the Toyota camp. That's what I think is going to end up happening for him next year in 2024. But I think it's really cool that he gets the send off that he deserves. It's going to be end of an era for him. I think he's accomplished a lot in the sport. He hasn't won a Daytona 500, of course, I don't think as a crew chief, but he's done a lot of great things for motorsports as a whole, has worked with a lot of great talents and a lot of great drivers as well. And I think he deserves a lot of respect and a lot of credit for what he's been able to accomplish in racing as a whole. So nonetheless, massive and huge congratulations to Jason Ratcliffe on an amazing, incredible career. He deserves a lot of respect. He did a lot of great things, and I think he's one of the greatest crew chiefs we've seen in a very, very long time. I wish he had a lot more success, but still really great and awesome to see him get the opportunity and chance to compete as a crew chief. I think he did amazing and a great job as a crew chief for Joe Gibbs Racing, all the organizations he worked with. But congratulations, Jason Ratcliffe, on an incredible career. You're getting a really good send-off like Kevin Harvick is this weekend. It's a shame it's the end, but nonetheless, I wish him the best of luck. I would imagine with the rumors about Sheldon Creed in just a second, I imagine that James Stankiewicz will probably be working with Sheldon Creed next year, but we'll see what happens to Jason Ratcliffe. But it's the end of Jason Ratcliffe's career as a crew chief. Nonetheless, congratulations, Jason Ratcliffe, on an incredible career as a crew chief for Joe Gibbs Racing. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sammy Smith and John Hunter Nemechek. Now, we did have a teammate feud that we're going to talk about. It was really big controversy regarding Childress Racing. But there was another teammate feud that was going on during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Martinsville, and that was a feud between Sammy Smith and John Hunter Nemechek. So, coming to the end of the race, Sammy Smith had one of the best cars built. I think he, in fact, did have the best car in the field. But on that same race car where the stuff happened between Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill, you had what happened between John Hunter Nemechek and Sammy Smith, where John Hunter Nemechek, I believe, put a block on Sammy Smith. To be fair, though, Austin Hill kind of came down, had a terrible restart, and I think John Hunter Nemechek was trying to avoid the wreck. After the race concluded, I can't remember which front stretch reporter was it Sammy Smith spoke to, but he spoke to a front stretch reporter, and he said that John Hunter Nemechek is not his teammate for this upcoming race at Phoenix, is not going to work with him all on Saturday, and he's going to try to win the race. I don't think he's going to try to cost him the championship, but he's not going to try to let John Hunter Nemechek get the victory. It's really interesting to think about because Sammy Smith was really good at Phoenix last spring. I understand Sammy Smith's frustration because if I'm not mistaken, Sammy Smith and John Hunter Nemechek, both of them, have had issues racing each other over the course of the last year. I go back to Road America where I believe John Hunter Nemechek confronted Sammy Smith after what happened on the racetrack between them. And I think they've also had issues from Portland earlier this year as well, where crazy and really interesting stuff that ended up taking place. Nonetheless, it's interesting to hear. I don't know how we're going to see them race each other. I hope that Sammy doesn't affect the outcome of the championship. I understand Sammy be frustrated and upset. Obviously, he's got nothing to lose because he's not going to be back with Joe Gibbs Racing next year in 2024 because he's going to be headed over to Junior Motorsports in the 2024 season. Nonetheless, I will see what happens going into the 2024 year, how he does. But next week is his final race with Joe Gibbs Racing. Then he'll go over to Junior Motorsports, which I think there's going to be a lot more respect for him at that Junior Motorsports camp. Let's just hope that they're not seeing Junior Motorsports violence on violence like we've seen with some of these teams this year. But I think it's interesting to hear that Sammy Smith was not very happy with John Hunter Nemechek. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt DiBenedetto. Now, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race had concluded on Saturday night, Matt DiBenedetto put out a video saying that he is working on his 2024 plans on his Twitter, his Facebook, and his Instagram. Where I know at this point that Matt DiBenedetto is not returning to Ratcliffe Racing in 2024, and Matt DiBenedetto also was let go a few weeks early. Now, Matt DiBenedetto did apologize for leaving people in the dark. He does have partnerships he's working on for 2024 and is hoping to announce something in the not-so-distant future. This is really, really good to hear for a lot of Matt DiBenedetto fans, including myself. I think Matt DiBenedetto is one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR today. He was very competitive this year with Ratcliffe Racing, got them to the playoffs, and he actually only was 4 or 5 points away from getting to the round of 8. But Matt DiBenedetto made the announcement earlier that he was going to leave Ratcliffe at the end of 2023 to pursue different opportunities. So Ratcliffe made the decision to cut him a little bit early, which I did not agree with the situation there, because in my honest opinion, Matt DiBenedetto should have been at least allowed to finish the rest of the year. A bad look for Ratcliffe, if you ask me. That being said, I said this about Matt DiBenedetto. I do believe that Matt DiBenedetto does deserve another chance and an opportunity in a really good team. Now, obviously, I don't think he'll be racing the Cup Series on a full-time basis. I think his only option would maybe be the 13 car for Kaulig Racing part-time in Cup if he was to go Cup racing, because that 16 car we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, who likely will get the 16 car next year. I could see him going to Kaulig Racing in the Xfinity Series in 2024. Obviously, there's a few Xfinity rides for Kaulig that are available, and Kaulig is expected to announce their plans in the coming weeks. You'll need a little sponsor funding if you're going to go to Kaulig now compared to a few years ago, but I think Matt DiBenedetto will be able to bring a little bit of that for 2024. I also could see Matt DiBenedetto return the Xfinity Series next year in Truck Series, I'd say, in 2024. Maybe going to Firmer Motorsports perhaps next year. That 38 truck is still available, even though Brett Moffitt's a favorite to potentially go there next year. He could go there. There's also some opportunities maybe going to Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series program on a part-time basis in 2024. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Matt DiBenedetto going into the 2024 season. But I believe Matt DiBenedetto does deserve another chance and opportunity. If you put him in a full-time ride, he will. If he goes Xfinity full-time, I think he will be an outside championship threat. I don't think a championship favorite next year, but I think if he goes Xfinity Series racing next year, I think he will do a solid and a very good job. So my prediction where he's going to end up, I think he goes to Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series because I think that would be a solid ride for him. I know Kaulig is not the fastest team in the world, but if anybody can get the best out of equipment for a team that's struggling, it definitely is Matt DiBenedetto. It's nonetheless, we'll see what happens in regards to that, but it sounds like Matt DiBenedetto is working on his 2024 plans. Hopefully they'll announce something here in the not-so-distant future, and we'll see where Matt DiBenedetto ends up racing in the 2024 NASCAR season. He deserves a good opportunity. We'll see where he ends up going in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Dillon. Now, every single Sunday for the NASCAR Cup Series race usually take place, Bob Pockrass usually does a thing called Business with Bob. And according to what Bob Pockrass had said, Bob says that Ty Dillon is working on going to Kaulig Racing in 2024. If Ty Dillon does, in fact, go to Kaulig Racing number 16 car for 2024, then A.J. Allmendinger will go to the Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024. Now, A.J. Allmendinger has publicly said that if he does go full-time in Xfinity Series, he still will run part-time in the Cup Series in 2024. Obviously, it's no secret that Ty Dillon does have a little bit of sponsorship funding. We already know at this point that Ty Dillon is not going to be returning to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season, as, of course, we know Carson Hocevar is taking over that 77 car in 2024. Now, does Ty Dillon deserve to be full-time with Kaulig Racing next year in Cup? Absolutely not, in my opinion. In my opinion, Ty Dillon has not been that great in the NASCAR Cup Series. Granted, he's not been with top-tier equipment. I think Kaulig Racing would probably be the best team he has driven for. But you go back to last year in 2022 when he drove the 42 car for Petty GMS. And Erik Jones completely outperformed him. I believe Ty Dillon only got like 2 top 10s or like 2 or 3 top 20s the whole entire year. We saw Erik Jones get like 20 or like a ton of top 20s and won the Southern 500 as well. And he was like top 10 and top 15 in points in the regular season standings. If you go through the full points format, Erik Jones like 11th or 12th. Ty Dillon was like 30th or 31st. And then, of course, Noah Gragson took over. Noah Gragson actually was worse than Ty Dillon, which is kind of crazy. No one thought that was going to happen, but Noah Gragson was worse, unfortunately. But we all have to remember that Ty Dillon does have connections with Richard Childress Racing. Obviously, Richard Childress is the grandfather of Ty Dillon, so it doesn't surprise or shock me that he would go to this ride. Now, how do I think Ty Dillon is going to do if he goes to the 16 car next year? I'm going to be honest, I don't expect Ty Dillon to set the world on fire. I think AJ will have better stats in Xfinity for sure, and I think he will probably be about top 30 in points at best, and I think Daniel Hemrick will be a better driver at Kaulig Racing. But in my opinion, if Ty Dillon does, in fact, go to Kaulig Racing next year, this is going to be a massive and a major downgrade for Kaulig Racing in general. And I think this team will have a little bit of a down step backwards because they have had at least a little momentum at the end of the year. But right now, I think that Kaulig's in a little bit of struggle. Now, personally, I want to see A.J. Allmendinger return to that 16 car full time. But again, a call comes down to sponsorship and funding, and Ty Dillon does bring that sponsorship and funding. So at this point, it doesn't surprise nor shock me that Ty Dillon is likely going to basically be taking over that ride next year. I expect Ty Dillon to struggle. Now, the big question is what happens to Kaulig Racing's NASCAR Xfinity Series program next year. We know that Chandler Smith is now returning to Kaulig Racing in 2024. and is expected to head over to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season. Dan Hemmer, of course, is going also full-time Cup racing in 2024. Again, there's a couple drivers who are likely to go in there. Aric Almirola for sure is headed over to the most likely to down to the Xfinity Series, probably in the 16 car, taking over Chandler Smith's ride. But what, of course, happens to the other rides? I think Matt DiBenedetto's in the running for one of those call-up rides next year for sure in 2024. And I also think there's a few other guys have an opportunity and chance. I think Lane Riggs is a candidate. Lane Riggs has made a few starts with call-up racing. I know Martinsville did not go great for him, but I think Lane Riggs is an extremely talented driver. He just had a lot of bad luck in the race. I also think that Derek Kraus is in the running for a call-up ride as well. Derek Kraus made quite a few starts with call-up, and I think for the most part, Derek Kraus has actually done a pretty good job with call-up racing this year, and I believe he's got a little bit of sponsorship and funding currently at the moment. So we'll see what happens in regards to what happens with Derek Kraus next year and who goes these call-up rides, but it sounds like at this point that Ty Dillon, in fact, will be headed over to call-up racing full-time in 2024. Which is a shame in my opinion, but it's not a major surprise in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed versus Austin Hill. Now, if you watched a NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw the beef between Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill and also Richard Childress Racing. So let's set the scene of what exactly happened. So, both Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill are on the front row on the final restart. There's two things that are going on. Number one, Austin Hill has the race lead on the restart. If Austin Hill goes on to win the race, he locks his way into the championship four. Sheldon Creed, meanwhile, needs to win the race to get into the championship four because he came in this race like 60 points below the cutoff line after two not-so-great races in the round of 8. The other thing that's going on at this time, though, is Sheldon Creed has already announced that he is not going to be returning to Richard Childress Racing in the 2024 season. So they go side by side going into the front stretch, and Austin Hill moves up the racetrack and moves Sheldon Creed up the track and nearly into the outside wall. Sheldon Creed gets behind him going down the back straightaway, and Sheldon Creed pushes him wide and up the racetrack side by side. Fair if you ask me. Then going down the front straightaway, Sheldon Creed backs out, and then going into turn number 1, Austin Hill once again gets bumped a little harder by Sheldon Creed going down in turn number 1. They go side by side, but then Austin Hill comes down the racetrack and forces Creed to go really, really wide. They go into turn number 3. Basically, Sheldon may have parked. I don't think it was intentional what he did, but goes down the racetrack and goes up the track, gets there. They're side by side. The brake causes Austin Hill's radiator to break, and you have a big wreck that takes place, and it's a side-by-side finish to line, and Justin Allgaier comes down and takes the victory from Sheldon Creed and RCR. As they're walking back, Austin Hill first claps at the 2 pit box. Kind of a little childish on Austin Hill's part, but probably the least childish thing I've seen here. Probably the least thing that really kind of affected it. In my opinion, nothing wrong there. I understand the frustration from Austin Hill. Then you have Andy Petrie, who goes over to Sheldon Creed and completely yells at him. And Sheldon Creed stands his ground and says, if he did the thing, you wouldn't say shit. And I do agree with Sheldon Creed. He would have said nothing if he ended up doing that. So in my opinion, completely, I understand Andy Petrie being a little upset and frustrated, but I don't know why Andy Petrie is completely upset. And then you have Austin Hill, who speaks to the media after the race. And he basically was not happy with him and said, I understand that Sheldon is trying to win the race, but he could have given me a chance and an opportunity. And then he also mentions that he did not know the point situation that was going on at the time. In my honest opinion, that is completely on Austin Hill not knowing, and also the rest of the team to not relay that information. They should have absolutely relayed that information to Austin Hill, and that's on them for not relaying that information, because had Austin Hill finished second in this race and Sheldon wins, they both make the championship four. Then Sheldon Creed, he spoke to me. Also, Austin Hill relayed that basically he can't wait to work with Jesse Love next year, and he can't wait to not have Sheldon Creed as a teammate next year. Can't wait to put up with his crap anymore next year. I'm going to say that in the most genuine way. Basically said, I'm not putting up with his stuff next year in 2024. And of course, he revealed that he's going to be going to Joe Gibbs Racing, that being Sheldon Creed, in 2024. Then Sheldon Creed, he spoke to me after, and he defended his ground, saying that I didn't completely dump him like Ty Gibbs in the corner, and kind of basically said that to the media, which I completely agreed, and didn't completely dump him. I think it was fair racing. I don't think Sheldon Creed really did anything wrong. But the thing that got a lot of people talking was what Richard Childress said. Richard Childress spoke to the media after the race and spoke to Dustin Law from NBC on his way out of the track, and Richard Childress Racing calls Sheldon Creed. He's had a lot of drivers race for him, and he calls Sheldon Creed the stupidest driver to drive for Richard Childress Racing. You don't do that to your teammate. What do you want me to tell you? Then you had Robbie Gordon yesterday put his perspective out there. He actually helped Sheldon Creed get the ride for Richard Childress, and he kind of gave his perspective and said, Richard, you would have let these guys be 1 and 2, you would have made the championship. But I want to go back to the Richard Childress comments that Richard absolutely made. In my honest opinion, completely childish and completely unprofessional from Richard. In my opinion, I don't think Sheldon Creed really did anything wrong in this situation. I know Austin Hill said they basically brake checked him in the corner. I think he was just trying to get through the corner there. But in my honest opinion, I don't think Sheldon Creed did anything wrong. And I find that to be an extremely disrespectful and unprofessional comment from Rich Childress. I get it's a heat of the moment thing, and I understand it being heat of the moment, but in my honest opinion, it is completely unacceptable now the way that Richard Childress has completely talked, and the whole organization has went after Sheldon Creed, when in my opinion, Sheldon Creed was not the one who started it. It was Austin Hill who started the contact. And calling him the stupidest driver that's ever driven Richard Childress Racing, do we all forget that Brian Scott and John West Townley drove for this team? Do you all forget that Ty Dillon has driven for this team? Again, of course, we're not going to see Richard call out his grandson because Ty Dillon is a grandson, of course, of Richard Childress. I also find that completely disrespectful considering the fact that Sheldon Creed had a chance to make it to the championship 4. Brian Scott and John West Townley were terrible. And also Joe Graff Jr. Joe Graff Jr. failed to qualify for this team. Every single race that John West Townley drove for Richard Childress Racing, he basically crashed out. And in my honest opinion, I think how Richard Childress and RCR handled this situation completely unprofessional, completely classist, and completely ridiculous. And I think Sheldon Creed is probably happy that he's not going to return to this team. But this is not the first time that Richard has done this kind of stuff in the media and gone in the media and said stuff. He fired Jeff Green after 2001 because Jeff Green kind of said is one person at this team. Then you had the situation with Kevin Harvick where he left the team early after 2013 because he was mad about the Dillons coming up. It just shows favoritism, and it's really frustrating and ridiculous from Richard Childress. And then you look at RCR in general. They have fallen off a cliff second half of the year. Austin Hill's not won since Pocono, and I think Sheldon Creed at times has been closer to winning races than Austin Hill. Has Austin Hill been a better driver this year? Yes, absolutely. Has Sheldon Creed made some bad moves this year on the track? Yes, absolutely. But in my honest opinion, the way that Rich Childress Racing and has handled the situation has been completely classist. And I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if Sheldon Creed is not in that 2 car next week. Don't be surprised if that doesn't end up happening this week in Phoenix or someone else in the 2 car. Jesse Love gets a week early because of it. Richard's been that petty before. Again, completely classist and completely unprofessional from Rich Childress Racing's end and their part. I don't blame Sheldon Creed for being upset with how the team has treated him because in my opinion, they've completely mistreated him in this situation, and it's completely ridiculous and unacceptable the way that Rich Childress said it. You don't go to media and do that. It's not normal behavior. You don't see this from teams. You didn't see Joe Gibbs call out his driver and call his driver. Kyle Busch dumb when he left Joe Gibbs Racing. We know that ended on bad terms, but in my opinion, it's not like Kyle Busch was called dumb by Joe Gibbs, so I think it was a bad move on their part and a really ridiculous move if you ask me. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed. Now, I've already kind of mentioned this, but Austin Hill basically let it out that Sheldon Creed will be joining Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Now, it's not been officially announced what number the Sheldon Creed is going to drive in 2024. Let's go back to the Austin Hill comments, completely unprofessional what Austin Hill said, trying to blur out what he's going to be doing next year. But it's no secret at this point that Sheldon Creed is going to be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season. Obviously, he's not going to return to Rich Childress Racing, and he said over the weekend, speaking to Sirius XM NASCAR Radio during the RCR Fan Days, that he said that he had the best opportunity he's ever had. Well, going to Joe Gibbs Racing, this is going to be the best opportunity and its best chance that Sheldon Creed has ever had in his NASCAR career. And I think Sheldon Creed, yes, he has not won a race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at this point, but Sheldon Creed has been close to winning races over the course of the last few years. You go back to 2022, back at Darlington, where he had one of the best cars in the field and probably the best car for a majority of that race, but had a really good battle between him, Noah Gragson, and Kyle Larson for the win, and there was a lot of respect between Sheldon Creed and Kyle Larson after the race had taken place. And you go back to this year, well, yes, he hasn't won. He's come close a couple times to winning races and nearly made it to the championship 4. I think Sheldon Creed is going to have a ton of pressure going into the 2024 season. And a major reason why he's going to have a lot of pressure next year is because he's going to be going to one of the best teams in the field. This year, John Hunter Nemechek has done an amazing job with Joe Gibbs Racing, scoring 7 wins this year, and currently right now is a favorite to win the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship in 2024. And 3, I should say. And of course, we already know John Hunter is going full-time in the Cup Series with Legacy Motor Club in the 2024 season. Sheldon Creed is going to have a lot of expectations going into 2024. I think the goal for Sheldon Creed is to not only win a few races, but be a championship threat and contender. Now, who is going to be his teammate next year in 2024? Well, according to reports and speculation, it sounds like Chandler Smith is also going to be headed over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Now, the announcement for Chandler Smith going to Joe Gibbs Racing was expected to take place last week. However, that announcement has still not happened at this point. But I do expect the announcement for Chandler Smith to go to Joe Gibbs Racing as well. I do believe that that announcement is going to be coming in the not-so-distant future, and I believe they'll both be announced together going over to Joe Gibbs Racing. Obviously, going back to Chandler Smith, talking about him, I think Chandler Smith, no disrespect to Sheldon Creed, I do believe that Chandler Smith is going to have a better year at Joe Gibbs Racing. I think Chandler Smith is going to be the best driver performing at the team next year on the full-time side. And we already know that Chandler Smith is first in line to go Cup Series racing. I think that Chandler Smith is going to be very competitive and get a lot of wins next year. That's not saying, no, that Sheldon Creed is going to struggle. I think Sheldon Creed is going to have a good year. Now, what ride is Sheldon Creed going to drive at with Joe Gibbs Racing? He could go to the 18 next year. That 18 car is available. Obviously, Sammy Smith is not returning to the team in 2024, as Sammy Smith is going to be going full-time with Junior Motorsports next year in the 2024 season. He, of course, will end up driving the number 8 car for Junior Motorsports in 2024. So my expectation is that Sheldon Creed is probably going to go maybe to that 18 car next year. He also go to the 19 car, but they're expected to bring the All-Star car back in 2024. John Hunter is probably going to make some part-time starts. Ty Gibbs is going to make more starts once again in 2024. And also William Sawalich, once he turns 18, will drive there. And of course, in 2025, William Sawalich is going to go full-time with the team. There's also, we need to talk about Ryan Truex. Ryan Truex wants to run full-time in NASCAR next year in 2024. And personally, I don't blame him. Ryan Truex had a great year this year in the Xfinity Series and the select races he ran, and I think he deserves to be full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season. So I can see him going full-time, but I think at this point it all comes down to sponsorship and funding, though he will at least run part-time because Mark Truex Jr., of course, is returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Again, going back to Sheldon Creed, though, there are going to be some pretty high expectations next year going to 2024 and a lot of pressure. But I think a lot of people next year are going to be rooting for Sheldon Creed to do a lot better than Austin Hill, considering the beef we talked about just a little bit ago, how the way Richard Childress has handled things. Could we see Sheldon Creed leave a week early and go to Joe Gibbs Racing a week early and race for them? That certainly is very, very possible at this point. This is a major story to continue following as time goes on, but it's expected that Sheldon Creed will head over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. I think he's going to be very, very competitive next year, and I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to be really good in 2024. But it will be Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith as teammates, maybe Ryan Truex being full-time as well if they could maybe have a 4th car. But also Aric Almirola could be headed there. We'll talk about Aric Almirola here in just a second. We'll see what happens in 2024. Nonetheless, so we know for sure that Sheldon Creed will, in fact, be headed over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, thanks to Austin Hill kind of blurring it out and revealing that he will be headed over there in the 2024 season. We'll see Sheldon Creed, in fact, head over to JGR in 2024 with an announcement expected here in the not-so-distant future. We'll see how Sheldon Creed does next year, but Toyota's getting other really good talent, and of course, I don't think Sheldon Creed's first in line to move up to Cup, but I think that Sheldon Creed will have a better opportunity to go Cup racing than being with Richard Childress, and I think he's been an afterthought at RCR for a very, very long time. We'll see Sheldon Creed, though, most likely over at Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, we did a video talking and covering this on this channel earlier this weekend, but it was announced on Saturday morning that Aric Almirola will not be returning to Stewart-Haas Racing in the 2024 season. And Smithfield also confirmed that they will not be returning in 2024 as well. Smithfield has been associated with Aric Almirola since the 2012 season when he joined, at the time, Richard Petty Motorsports, and they followed him over to Stewart-Haas Racing for 2018 when he joined the team. Aric Almirola, in my opinion, is one of the most overhated drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series today. Aric Almirola has been a very solid driver in the NASCAR Cup Series the last few years, And I want to give Aric Almirola a big shout because yesterday's in the NASCAR Cup Series race, he had a very, very good race where he ended up finishing in second place, had a chance to win. And in the last 10 to 11 races, Aric Almirola's only had one finish outside the top 20 and has jumped from like 27th or 28th to points all the way up to like 21st or 22nd to points, and is the second best driver in the points that's in the Stewart-Haas racing camp. Obviously, it's not a big surprise that he is retiring from full-time racing. Again, he's not completely done racing. We'll talk about that in a second. But Aric Almirola basically has kind of wanted to do this. He kind of revealed to the media as well that he's kind of want to do this where he want to not run full-time and want to run on a part-time basis. However, he did reveal that he can run part-time in the Cup Series in 2024 and also could run in the Xfinity Series and Truck Series as well. I go back to those Joe Gibbs Racing rumors. There's been some speculation recently that, I know that kind of terms ended amicably after 2007 after issues kind of soar between him after the whole Milwaukee fiasco about 15 or 16 years ago. But it's been 16 years since that situation happened, so I could definitely see him going back to Joe Gibbs Racing with Smithfield, work with him as well. And also, of course, with the Truck Series as well, he can run part-time there and run some late model races and some grassroots races as well in 2024. As for Aric Almirola, like I said, Aric Almirola has been a pretty solid driver in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's gotten 3 career wins up to this point, one in 2014 at Daytona in that rain-shortened race. Then in 2018, he won at Talladega after Kurt Busch ran out of gas. And then he had that dominant win in 2021 and has shown some good things with Stewart-Haas Racing for the last few years. Again, I know Aric Almirola's not been a fantastic the last few years, but again, I think we all have to remember that Stewart-Haas Racing themselves as an organization right now is really not that great and good as an organization at the moment. So we need to cut Aric Almirola a lot of slack, in my opinion. So I think a lot of the blame goes more to Stewart-Haas Racing than anything else at this particular moment. Now, the big question right now is who's going to end up taking that 10 car in 2024. Most people in the industry are speculating right now that Noah Gragson will end up taking over the 10 car in 2024. Now, why Noah Gragson? Well, Noah Gragson obviously got reinstated back in the sport in recent weeks. If I'm not mistaken, Noah Gragson, despite the controversy that took place, Noah Gragson does have a little bit of sponsorship and a little bit of funding with him. Noah Gragson does have, I still believe, Black Rifle Coffee, and I think Wendy's is still working with him as well. I mention this because Noah Gragson, like I said, does have a little bit of sponsorship funding. And I don't think that Gene Haas wants to completely fund his money out of pocket. Now, I would expect that if Noah Gragson does, in fact, go to the 10 car next year in 2024, I would expect that he will end up bringing a little bit more funding there, and Gene will not have to put as much funding into Noah Gragson next year. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys when it comes to Noah Gragson. I like Noah Gragson a lot. I'm going to tell you, the first year he drove the Gen 7 car, the next gen car, whatever it's called now at this point, he completely struggled. Noah Gragson had his only 2 top 20 finishes this year in 21 starts. Since Noah Gragson left, he has only, since then, Carson Nosbar has scored 4 top 20 finishes in the number 42 car. And that's just the truth. Carson Nosbar has been a better driver. I know the last 2 weeks haven't gone as good for Carson, and I think Legacy Motor Coach was starting to fall off a little bit more. But Carson Nosbar, in my opinion, has done a very good job in that car. We obviously know he's going to be going full-time there. And, of course, to switch into Toyota, which I think John Hurt-Nemechek is going to be pretty good next year in the Cup Series, along with Erik Jones. And we've seen Erik Jones get better since Noah Gragson left. I really don't think Noah Gragson is going to do great, but I will defend Noah on some parts that I think a lot of that comes down to Stewart-Haas Racing's equipment. They're obviously also losing Kevin Harvick at the end of this upcoming week, as Kevin Harvick is retiring at the end of the week and is going to join the Fox Sports booth in the 2024 season. So I will cut Noah Gragson a little bit slack there, but Noah Gragson did struggle in his first year. But I don't expect Noah Gragson to do as good as Aric Almirola. In fact, I think Stewart-Haas Racing is going to have a little more of a decline near the end of this season, and the next year, I should say, because of that, unfortunately. I just think right now Stewart-Haas Racing a little bit of a decline at the moment when it comes to performance and it comes to speed. And I have a little bit of theory that maybe this could be open up potential possibility of if Noah Gragson does go there, maybe Junior Motorsports getting involved and invested. I think that's just rumor at this point because I think Dale Jr. wants to own his own team. You've got 2 former Junior Motorsports drivers going over there. You've got Josh Berry, of course, going in the 4 car and Noah Gragson going over. But, of course, Dale Jr. and Tony Stewart are pretty good friends. And, of course, we now know that Josh Berry is part of Kevin Harvick Incorporated, so that makes a lot of sense why he's going over there next year. As for back to Aric Almirola, I think Aric Almirola does deserve a lot of respect, and I hope he continues racing next year in 2024. He won Xfinity Series race for crying out loud earlier this year with RSS Racing. He did a pretty good job. And I think Aric Almirola, I know people said that Aric didn't do anything, and yet I think a couple people trying to put out his average finish. Yes, he doesn't have the greatest average finish in the world, but his average finish got a lot better when he went over to Stewart-Haas Racing and showed major improvement, because Richard Petty Motorsports, when he drove for them, they were not a very good team. So in my honest opinion, Aric Almirola does deserve a lot more respect than he's gotten. I want to congratulate Aric Almirola on a very solid NASCAR Cup Series career. He's had a couple really big wins. He did some great things for the sport, got some opportunities to compete, and got to do what he wanted to do with a really good sponsorship and really good funding. So congratulations to Aric Almirola on a great career. It's going to be really sad to see him go at the end of the 2023 season from full-time racing, but he's going to open up the door for Noah Gragson next year, and hopefully Noah can step up to plate and have a good year. But I'm going to be honest, Noah Gragson's probably not going to do a lot next year in 2024 because of the equipment that he's in. It's not because of the talent. I think it's going to be a lot more due to the equipment, unfortunately. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. Well, thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links are below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How do you think Noah Gragson's going to do at Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024? What are your thoughts about Aric Almirola's career? And what are your thoughts about Sheldon Creed most likely headed over to Joe Gibbs Racing 2024 and the RCR and Austin Hill debacle? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we'll have the NASCAR Truck Series race picks for Phoenix. And then tomorrow on the channel, of course, we'll have the Xfinity Series Championship 4 predictions and the Xfinity Series race picks for Phoenix as well. Then on Wednesday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series Championship predictions and a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. We got a lot of great content dropping on the channel for Championship Week, and I can't wait for you guys to check it out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.